I gotta put this closer.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another installment of Vida Latina Upstate podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts here, Daniel Irizarry.
And I'm his father, Dan Irizarry. Welcome everybody who's listening, and I hope you'll stay till the end.
You know, there's actually three Dans here. There's Dan Irizarry, Daniel, which you could shorten to Dan, and then there's this one.
Oh.
Which is a Funko Pop? What is it called?
I forget what it's called.
A Funko Pop of him. What do you think? Similarities?
Well, I shaved, so I think it's not
no longer
consistent.
accurate.
Well, I'll have to grow it back just to make it accurate.
Okay. Anyway, there's a Funko Pop. I think that's funny.
Should we make it available as merch?
We could make it available as merch, but we'd have to change. It'd have to be a different supplier. We can't, resell Funko Pop stuff without getting a
go ahead.
Injunction from.
Vamos dale.
So anyway, yeah. So welcome back to Vida Latina Upstate, the Vida Latina Upstate podcast. I'm here with my dad. We're going to talk today a little bit about
places
my
and
dad
places I've
and
been.
No, not exactly. Kind of.
Okay.
My dad and his background with the Fuerzas Armadas para la Liberación Nacional, which is the FALN, which is a paramilitary group, so to speak. I was active in Chicago and New York back in the 70s and 80s. And so my father has regaled me, as he would say, with stories of his youth over the years and some of the famous or infamous people that he's met along the way. But one story in particular always stands out, and this is the truth. His brush with some of the members of the Fuerzas Armadas para la Liberación Nacional, the FALN. Full disclosure, my dad is not now, nor has ever been, this is for legal purposes, nor has ever been
allegedly
a part of the FALN, but he did spend some of his time with guys that ended up getting arrested and all that, and we'll get into it. So he spent time with some guys that might be considered criminals back then, but as part of that, it was all part of the Puerto Rican Independence Movement on the civic side, let's say. And at a time when this revolutionary organization was most active, again, it's in the 70s and 80s, and again in Chicago, and he was in New York, the New York side. Today I'm going to explore the when, what, where, and who, I guess, of his experience and what it was like to be caught up in that movement back in the day. So, Dad, could you provide some background for our people regarding how you came into contact with these guys back in the 80s, right? In the 80s?
Yeah.
I seem to remember that you said it had something to do with a radical priest that you met.
Yeah, so actually it goes, the precursor of all of these events that have to do with the FALN began when I met Frank Morales when I was a student at Vassar College, and I was active in the anti-apartheid movement at that time. And I think he happened upon the campus at one point, and we met and struck up a dialogue. We started hanging out.
Well, who is Frank Morales?
Frank Morales is a priest a radical priest who I met, who has since made a name of himself around the politics of conspiracy theories, specifically around the JFK assassination and also the 9/11 situation. He was when I met him, he was heavily into, he was heavily into the conspiracy theory stuff around JFK. Now you have to remember when I met him, he was already 27, 28, 29 years old, I believe. He had a wife and a kid, but he had come through those struggles on the campus in the late 60s and the anti-war movement.
He went there, you're saying?
What?
He went to Vassar?
No, he went to Cornell.
Oh, okay.
I met him because he was the pastor or the assistant pastor of an Episcopal church in Poughkeepsie,
which is where Vassar is.
Which is where Vassar is located. So we got to know each other, and we started working on social causes. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I started working with migrant farm workers, legal services for migrant farm workers, and he was still based in Poughkeepsie, and at one point he said that he was being directed to New York City, which is, of course, my home as well. He was a native New Yorker. But Frank Morales had made a name for himself on the Lower East Side, which is where he grew up, and he was associated with the famous St. Mark's Church in the Lower East Side on St. Mark's Place, where there's always been kind of a hub of dissent and radical traditions. And so he ended up there after I kind of lost contact with him. But I've read about what he's been doing there, and so he's been a controversial figure for many years.
He's
But
around still?
yes, he is.
Okay. We'll get to that part, I guess. Go ahead.
But he ends up accepting a parish, being co-assistant pastor at a parish in the South Bronx, the famous St. Anne's Episcopal Church, which is a historic church right on
St. Anne's Avenue.
St. Anne's Avenue. And he said to me, "Look, why don't you come back with me to New York and I'll get you a job."
You mean like during summer, during school, or after school?
No, after school. This is after school.
It was done. Okay.
And he said, if you want, you come check it out. So I went down, and St. Anne's is an absolutely magnificent church that dates back to the Revolutionary War times in the middle of the South Bronx, at a time where it was very chaotic.
In the 80s? No. So what was it like to work in the South Bronx when the Bronx was burning, as they called it? Was it as bad as they portray?
Oh, yeah. It was easily that bad.
And I'd like to note that still to this day, my European friends, all of them, it's a stereotype they learn in school that El Bronx or El Bronx is like a war zone, like it's the worst neighborhood. That's what they talk about when they use it. Not anymore, it's correct. But they use it as like a way to say the ghetto. Like this is like El Bronx. It's like.
Well, for a long time, it was kind of synonymous with the ghetto. I mean, it's the same as, well, Harlem had prominence, obviously, because you had West Harlem and East Harlem, and you had the black tradition of art and music.
The Renaissance, what do they call it?
What?
They call it the Renaissance, the Black Renaissance.
The Harlem Renaissance.
Harlem Renaissance, yeah.
So you had that history there, and then East Harlem became famous, especially during the time when the Young Lords were active, etc.
And Rayos.
And
Rayos is there.
You have to stick in the Italian connection.
That's East Harlem. Go ahead.
So working at the time in the South Bronx was a really kind of scary situation there. There was a high crime, a lot of drugs. It was just at the time, it was, the famous Bronx is burning while the World Series is being played at Yankee Stadium, and Howard Cosell makes that observation. And so after that, it was also the time when both President Reagan and Jimmy Carter had famously gone to visit the ruins, and there was always
it was a war zone.
These shots of absolute destruction, which was pretty much what was happening because of the fact that absentee landlords were making a profit burning the buildings, since because of the white flight that occurred, in part because of the creation of Co-op City, which is where a lot of the white folks ended up leaving the urban core for places like Co-op City and the suburbs. You had white flight, you had Black and Latino families couldn't afford to move, disinvestment in the housing stock, landlords who could not turn a profit because people were too poor to pay the type of rents that make real estate a viable business, began to see profit in in arson for profit. And so that's the world that what it was like. And I came to St. Anne's to work for the St. Anne's housing development company, which really developed no housing. I was a tenant advocate. I was a tenant organizer at that part. And I worked for Frank. We were based out of the church. I eventually ended up squatting in a city-owned building and rehabilitating that. And so those two buildings that I helped to rehabilitate and organize are still standing.
So where in this, I'm not going to say mess, but where in this story do the FALN characters, the Libreria de Caribe, all that stuff, where does that fit in?
So again, Frank being a radical person, he began to tune into the independence movement. And at that time,
Puerto Rican, Frank?
They were Puerto Rican Independence Movement. I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying, was he Puerto Rican also?
Yeah, Frank is part Puerto Rican. I think he's Puerto Rican and Peruvian, I want to say. But he began to develop an interest, and I was kind of teaching him Spanish because he didn't know much Spanish, quite frankly. And I translated a couple of his sermons, and we began to kind of explore the issue. And I think at one point we had people from the independence movement come and make a presentation at the church.
Elevator pitch for
No, not at all. Not at all. So,
a lot more radical, I'm assuming.
so we, I think there was, you have to remember that this was a time after the FALN bombed the Francis Tower and became kind of the terrorist group of the time. And they were able to quite adeptly perform acts of terrorism that had the country unnerved, at least certainly in New York City.
Very unnerved. And they would
and
send
had the FBI very interested, to say the least. And there was a lot of foment going on. Remember, the main areas of this foment were Chicago and New York City.
Yeah, to the big, at that point, to the two biggest cities.
And of course, you had foment on the island because you had the macheteros, which were more Marxist-Leninists, I think, in their.
They were all Marxist-Leninists, kind of. The FALN was pretty Marxist-Leninist.
I think so. I think there was kind of a hybrid going on there.
But
So what happened was that a couple of the Rosado brothers ended up meeting Frank Morales, and they started to talk about the movement and what ways that we could collaborate with the independence movement as it existed at that time.
And the Rosado brothers, Andres and Julia, I believe. I said it in one of the last ones, but
there were three, but I only met two of them.
You only knew two. I don't even know if the third one was even active because he didn't get. I don't think he got pinched or anything.
He was active, but in Chicago, I think.
Maybe. Okay.
I don't want to misspeak. I just
especially if the guy's alive. It's not. But put him in anything that he didn't do. But so just for a little bit of context, the FALN Francis Tavern is still the place on Wall Street to have big high-end business meetings and stuff for lunch.
It's the center of the beating heart of the world financial
system. Exactly. For them, it was not a light target because there was peoples in it. It was symbolic, but there are people in it, and that's where it got.
I don't think they intended to, but they were an armed resistance group.
No, I get all that stuff. I'm saying, just for context, people did die. I'm not going to say the M word because you're not supposed to say that on YouTube, but people were killed, let's say, in this famous incident, and it was also what people call the first domestic terror group or whatever in the country. Now, looking back historically, and they would send mostly soft target bombings. They would bomb a bank or some sort of institution that represented capitalism and exploitation and imperialism, and they would send. With every bombing, they would send the FBI a note that says, "Make Puerto Rico free under these conditions, or we'll keep doing it." That's just the context. And the brothers were lieutenants, let's say capos, whatever.
And there was a strong symbiosis between the teachings of Don Pedro on the one hand, some of the discussion we had with
Nelson Denis
on the author of The War Against All Puerto Ricans, in that it was constantly a topic of discussion for El Maestro, for Don Pedro Albizu Campos, that the case of Puerto Rico, the colonization of Puerto Rico by the United States, was a matter that should be adjudicated in an international forum before the United Nations.
After the Second World War.
A big tenet of the FLN was that the people who were incarcerated were prisoners of war.
Sure.
So
people,
Lolita Lebron, the collection of
all the military guys,
independentistas, that they were actual prisoners of war. So that was a big focus of that, and they believed in the legitimacy of the armed struggle against a colonial power, not unlike George Washington was and the rebels
occupying power,
against the British Empire. And so as I began to explore the whole idea of the independence movement and become a little bit radicalized myself.
Watch it.
And I began, it was an opportunity for me to learn more about my culture and about Puerto Rican history. And I kind of delved in with both feet. And there was a civic organization. So you had the clandestine organization, which was the FALN, and you have the civic structure of support, which were the comités to free the nationalist prisoners. And then there was the famous apprehension of the 11 FALN members in Chicago. So that became El Movimiento para Liberar los Once, the 11 prisoners.
But tell the story quick. You told it kind of, but you were at dinner? So I always thought you were at dinner with his mom or something. Rosado brothers.
No, what
when
happened?
the Once got pinched, when the 11 people got arrested in Chicago.
That was...
Those were his friends.
Can I tell the story? Thank you. So as I began to relate more with these folks, with the Rosado brothers, they began to invite Frank and me to studies, like book studies. So we'd go and we'd go to the famous houses there that where they lived in. There's a housing development. I can't say
Cedric?
So I met his mom, or their mom, who would cook for us, and we would sit around and talk about like the principles of, the Puerto Rican Independence Movement, and the need for armed struggle, etc. And little by little, I began to kind of feel a vibe.
At the dinner.
Because there was a larger circle of people that were, again, in the civic involvement. I did not know that there was clandestinity afoot that close to me.
Clandestinity, is that a word?
Yes. La clandestinidad, that was a subject, a topic of conversation. And so I met people within that circle and became friends with them. We used to socialize, etc. And then I began to see that I was being kind of, I don't want to say the word groomed, but it was a grooming of sorts, with the end of would you be a reliable person in the struggle? Or are you some kind of agent? I didn't really understand these things at the time, but in retrospect, I began to see that they were basically testing me. They were saying, would you meet so-and-so at this certain place?
Yeah.
And I think at one point they asked me to give $100 to somebody to bring it to this.
It's just place. Giving kids in the neighborhood little runner jobs. That's kind of what it was.
The Stuyvesant houses. Stuyvesant houses was
test your loyalty and things.
Is a big affordable Michelama development in the Lower East Side of Manhattan.
That's where their house was. Yeah.
That's where the mom used to live. I don't know if they had an actual official address there, but the mom lived in the Stuyvesant houses, and I used to go there with Frank, and we used to have these meetings. And there was a really fascinating group of people that were involved at all levels of society.
Oscar Lopez Rivera was the biggest one, right?
What's that?
Oscar Lopez Rivera was the biggest.
Was the biggest one?
He was the head honcho of the FLN, no?
I don't know that there was any one.
Okay, he was a head lieutenant.
There were several people who were prominent in the movement at that time. Of course, it was, I think, William Morales was the
guy that got caught, I think.
Oh, he blew his hands off.
Yeah, blew his hands off and they got caught.
So what happened also was that the group led by the Rosado brothers opened up a bookstore.
They opened up the books. Okay.
In a building where Cuando, which is an old organization from the Lower East Side, which I was just researching. There's not a lot written about them, but they were like a mainstay in the Lower East Side of the Latino, Puerto Rican, affordable or tenant squatting movement. So they would take buildings and take them over, and people would live there, and they'd fix them up.
Gotcha.
And that was a big part of what Cuando was dealing with. One of the buildings was a Cuando building, and Rosado Brothers and some of the organization decided were going to establish a bookstore.
Yeah.
And that bookstore was called Librería del Caribe. Mm-hmm. And I still have one or two books from there, but they basically,
I think I've seen them.
They basically had revolutionary tracks.
Oh, the revolutionary literature.
Something like almost akin to the anarchist cookbook, which I don't know if everybody out there knows, but you could drop a note in the comments. And
don't drop a note in the comments about the anarchist cookbook. It's illegal. It is illegal.
So There
It
was
was like a how to be a
books
revolutionary.
about guerra de guerrilla,
Yeah.
just like basic kind of
Che Guevara, Marx, Bolivar.
a lot of those that type of intellectual discussions about, you know.
And you go
the
there, and
armed
your
struggle.
some people will watch you, right? They watch you in there.
Well, there was always that element. It would seem that there was a van that would always sit across the street on Houston
The feds, yeah.
and monitor what was going on. Of course, I don't know that to be a fact, but it was certainly something that
I'm gonna
the
find
group
out.
was pretty convinced.
We're gonna do a FOIA and try to find out
Right.
everything he was accused of or informed upon about.
Right. So,
Yo, I know this guy Dan. He's a who knows? We'll see.
So on one particular night, I think there was a phone. It was like we were in the study group having some dinner or whatever, and then one of the brothers got up and gets a phone call, and it's like a commotion. And I think it was like the next day that they announced that they had
gotten the 11.
Had arrested.
Yeah, because I think William Waddell was arrested first. I believe they caught him first and then led to everybody else. But I might be wrong on that. You can check me on that. But so more or less, you're with the guy, and then 2 days after that, he's on the FBI's most wanted list.
Yeah,
the two of them.
Things developed rather quickly
heated
after that. But again, this was I was a young man and in my formative years. A little younger than you.
It made me feel old. Okay. Go ahead.
But I was at an impressionable age, but there was a point at which my moral upbringing, my Christian upbringing began to sort of become opposed to some of the things that were being said.
You had objections, moral objections.
There was friction
based upon your own fundamental
between their philosophy and my philosophy, and that was, there was, for instance, one of the guys. He wasn't one of the brothers, but one of the circle had military experience. By the way, they advocated having military experience.
Yeah, sure.
They said, it wouldn't be a bad idea if you went enlisted in the army and you could learn how to use weapons.
This is after there was any war, so it would be, or there wasn't any wars at this time, so you could go enlist and like train and whatever and come back.
Well, this was true. There were no hot wars. There was a lot going on in Latin America at this time, of course, which,
This was right after the Iranian Revolution and Middle Eastern.
Well, there was also a lot, in Nicaragua.
Yeah, the Sandinistas.
The Sandinistas. Anyway, so there was a lot of tumult in the world.
So they told you.
But as they began to kind of push the idea of, you should consider this and consider that, then there was talk about, in war there are casualties, So as I began to hear some of that rhetoric, I started to go, whoa. This is no longer kind of just
we're not into killing people.
In the ideological realm. This is now going to, the armed struggle aspect of this. And there obviously, I'm sure I was naive at the time to think that it wasn't, or maybe that never occurred to me at the time. But it was certainly something that I began to feel uncomfortable with. I was all for the civic part of it. I was all for struggling against colonization.
Using the bully pulpit.
And about, how that was manifesting in my own neighborhood. For instance, on St. Anne's Avenue, there was a clinic called Segundo Ruiz Belvis, after one of the many Puerto Rican leaders. There was a clinic, and there was a famous doctor named Dr. Silva, who came from Puerto Rico to take over the administration of that clinic, which was right on St. Anne's, as memory serves me, across from the park. And that doctor had been actively involved in the mass sterilization of Puerto Rican women that occurred in the
one that took over? The one he took over for?
He came from the island.
Yeah.
To take over Segundo Ruiz Belvis. At least that was what proposed.
And so that doctor that came over was the one that sterilized people. No, the one he took over.
As I said.
I'm confused.
As I said, Dr. Silva was recruited to come and lead this clinic. However, the independence movement, the people who were involved in the movement smelt that come and found that out or whiffed that out, and they developed a mass organization against it, mass opposition against it. And then we were able, I'm just trying to finish the point. We were able to stop that from happening. It was very controversial. Stop that happening. But what I'm trying to say is that there were echoes of that colonization, echoes of that oppression, even in the South Bronx.
And he was your own people, right? Dr. Silva, no?
Era puertorriqueño, por supuesto.
Is there a word for a Puerto Rican, self-hating Puerto Rican?
Vende patria.
Vende patria. Anyway. Dr. Silva was a vende patria. But to give the context again, footnote here for people that don't know, the birth control was first tried on Puerto Rican women, and they didn't know what they were taking in these clinical trials, and ended up sterilizing, whether by
I think a third of
33% of childbearing women
population on the island.
Which is absolutely insane. There was what 4 million at the time. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There was 8 million. There's 8 million Puerto Ricans, so let's say 3 million, 4 million. Back then, a third of them, over 1 million people. Not over 1 million. 500,000, whatever. We don't know the numbers. Regardless, okay.
Back a third of all childbearing women.
Okay, a third. Back to for the clip. A third. So the American government.
They were experimenting.
They were experimenting
this drug. I'm not saying they intended, but that was an after effect that they did little about.
No, they didn't care if they would sterilize them. In other words,
it was just the fact of using them as guinea pigs is what the takeaway.
And all the kids that could have been born, that could have birthed the president or something. Who knows?
So again, the colonization of and the experimentation of women and bodily autonomy that happened in the 50s and the 60s, I believe, and then to try to transfer it to the South Bronx, where a large Puerto Rican population was present, was outrageous. And so that was all of a piece with what was going on in that time because of the Puerto Rican Independence Movement. And so I find it to be a fascinating period in the history of the Puerto Rican people in New York. And that was my brush with a very dangerous and very infamous organization.
And so this was just another tale from the Barrio, not El Barrio. There's a difference.
Right.
The Barrio meaning, in this case, the South Bronx. And we're going to be bringing on some people in the near future that can talk more about the South Bronx in the modern day. And we're really looking forward to that.
Absolutely.
And this was a great conversation. Got to know some things I didn't know. And articulate and compelling as always. Robust, as they say.
Y que viva Puerto Rico libre y independiente.
Claro. Okay, so thank you for watching the Vida Latina Upstate podcast. Follow us on Instagram, Vida Latina Upstate. And click the subscribe button. Dad, saludos.
Hasta luego, mi gente.
Okay. Sempre pa'lante. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you for watching the Vida Latina Upstate podcast, brought to you by Virtual Barrio Productions. Follow us on Instagram at Vida Latina Podcast. That's Vida Latina Podcast on Instagram. Subscribe to this channel, Vida Latina Upstate podcast, for more content every 2 weeks. And thank you to my dad, Dan Irizarry, and Sempre pa'lante. Ciao.